Hello, sir.
Hello, Aditya.
Sir, after a long time, we are sitting again to understand democracy. Today, I want to understand something very basic. I want to start from ground zero because I am shocked by it. I'll tell you why. In the last couple of months, the moment I open a news channel, an elected representative or a nominated one seems to be switching parties. Started with Raghav Chadda, Aam Aadmi Party to BJP, then Operation Tiger yesterday. While we were making some notes on the constituency of what the composition of Lok Sabha is, parties changed. Trinamool Congress, and then Operation Lotus, of course, everybody knows BJP taking in MPs and MLAs, right? This is the context, it's happening. And it's happening on a scale in my recent memory, and I'm very, very young, it's very new. Of course, there was the Ayaram, Gayaram era, but in this era, this is extremely rampant at this point in time. My first question to you is, does a voter not feel cheated when that happens?
It's largely a middle class phenomenon. See, you must look at our constitutional framework. There is no mention of political parties in the constitution until the 10th schedule.
Correct.
Until the anti-defection provisions are there. Nor there is a mechanism to regulate political parties. Only Election Commission impose some guidelines, very desultory. Hardly anybody bothers about them. So parties have neither a statutory status nor a constitutional status, and yet they are an overwhelming presence in the reality of political life because they are the fore of a political mobilization of the people, and therefore by implication for participation of citizens in the political process. Now the middle class takes a party loyalty very seriously, like almost religious loyalty. Going against the party is apostasy, or religious conversion, blasphemy, that kind of a thing. Whereas the people view the legislator as a representative, actually more an advocate, as a fellow who gets things done. They're not even looking at him as a representative, as a legislator. A representative maybe, but not as a legislator, because that's not the function they really give importance to. So what the Constitution demands is to function as a legislator. And from the majority of legislature, the government comes. So in other words, legislature is the mother of the government. That is the constitutional theory. The reality is, as long as you command majority support in the legislature, government is supreme boss. Legislature is government's creature. Legislation is whatever governments want that day. So given this, there's a disjunction between the popular perception and the constitutional reality and the middle class sentiments. And ordinary people don't seem to care that much. Actually, if you notice, in many cases, the cleverer politicians who have some grassroots support or some strength locally, they go back to the constituency before switching a party. They say, we're asking our voters, our constituents, what they want. Very often you'll be surprised, the voters say switch to ruling party. Because voters also are somewhat transactional. I would not use the word cynical. They're basically saying, look, as long as we get things done because you are with the powers that be, that's what matters to us. But when the time comes to decide whether or not they want to continue the same party in power, that's when people assert. But as long as they know the party in power will continue to be there, either defections to the ruling party or the local government elections, people tend to prefer to support the party in power at the state level, particularly party in power at the state level, because they want things to be done. So this also speaks of absence of a political culture where ruling party or opposition, things get done the same way. That's what it should be. That's what it is not in many cases. So it's a bit of a complicated question.
So I have other questions, but an immediate follow-up to that emerges in my head is that not an appalling failing of the Indian democracy? Is it not then, say, just one party rule? Is opposition so powerless that to get things done you have to join the ruling dispensation?
Absolutely wrong. There's no question about it. It means two things. One is arbitrary exercise of power, whereas rule of law is very clear, the constitution is very clear, principles of justice are very clear, but they're all far removed from reality, and it's getting worse in the country. It used to be a little better 50 years ago, 60 years ago, with all imperfections. The Congress, of course, was the dominant party. There's a lot of abuse of power. Don't mistake. There's no question that Congress abused power phenomenally when they were a dominant party. But at least there was some decorum to respect the opposition members, Congress or other parties, for a long time. But increasingly, particularly in states, if you belong to an opposition party, then you'll be denied almost anything, even in terms of public good, where basic infrastructure, collective goods, or welfare. Though luckily, welfare is getting better because of digitization. It's not as discretionary as it used to be earlier. Otherwise, even ration cards, whether you get or not, whether old age pension you get or not, it's all mediated by the partisan political process. The welfare part is getting better, but even then, otherwise, in general, it is widely assumed with some degree of accuracy that if you don't support the ruling dispensation, you probably will not get the things done for the constituents.
So now I would like to bring the current context, right? I think with the whole Operation Tiger and more such sort of splits, mergers, the two-third majority, Trinamool Congress also will do that. Another question that comes up is the real political party, which is the real Shiv Sena, which is the real Trinamool Congress. Is it the workers or the founder? I want, because you've also been you've had your experience in that aspect as well. What do you think is the real political party, the workers or the founder?
Absolutely the workers. If the party is an organization made up of members, members are the owners of the party, members must control the party, members must decide who is the leader of the party or leaders of the party at various levels. Members should decide who the candidate for the elective office from the party is. Whereas in reality, in most of the parties, whoever founded the party or the scion of that family, the son, daughter, inheritors of that mantle, or whoever has somehow occupied the key position in the party, is the supreme leader. Nobody dares to challenge them. There may be occasionally some make-believe election process. Take Congress party. Now let's be truthful. Can anybody claim that there can be a genuine election of Congress party, of a leader who is not favored by or endorsed by, implicitly or explicitly, by the ruling family of the Congress? For instance, Shashi Tharoor contested. Now, the party top brass, represented by the ruling family, did not play a neutral role. They may pretend otherwise. The truth is, everybody knew exactly whom they supported. The other day, a member of parliament from Assam, he switched loyalty because he said, ever since he supported Shashi Tharoor's candidature, his life was made miserable in his party. Therefore, he had to leave. He was a fairly senior member of the Assam Congress Party. So, this has become the norm. The moment you challenge the supremacy of the top boss, then you're out of the party. Time and again it happened. If you remember NCP, yes. How did that come about? Sharad Pawar, then Sangma, another leader whose name I don't readily recall now. They all were thrown out because they simply challenged Mrs. Sonia Gandhi's right to become Prime Minister. They did not even challenge her right to be the President of the Congress Party. On account of a different race, European origin, upbringing, they felt Indian people would not accept a foreign-born, non-Indian, non-brown-skinned person to become the Prime Minister. Now, their right or wrong is immaterial. Merely for the sin of opposing the legislative leadership or governmental leadership of the party's presiding deity, they had no choice but to leave the party. So, this is the norm in the political parties, and that culture has spread to almost every major party in the country, particularly all regional parties.
So one of the reasons for, say, leaving a party is the lack of internal party democracy. Like you mentioned, there is the scion and those sort of people dictate things, right? But truth be told, majority of these people are shifting because there is a cash-driven system, right? You are actually going ahead and offering people cash. I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming both MLAs and MP shift is because cash is being offered to you, or there's an ED raid or a CBI raid, right? In this scenario, what can a voter do? That's my concern.
No, first let's understand the circumstances. The largest number of candidates switch loyalties because of the promise of power. Mr. P. V. Narasimha Rao, as Prime Minister, when there were defections into Congress as a party in power, he said Congress is a party with the promise of power. And therefore people joined Congress. It was a natural thing, kind of thing. There was no pretense also. So that is unquestionably the single biggest cause. But there's also an issue of internal party democracy, the question you raised, which is the real party, which is not. Now, it doesn't matter whom you like, whom you dislike. In case of Shiv Sena, when BJP and Shiv Sena together went to the polls as alliance partners, with explicit guarantee, with a common agenda, that they will together form the government if they are elected to office, post-election, Shiv Sena pulled out saying that we have to have Chief Minister's office, otherwise we'll pull out. And then they joined the opposition whom they defeated just then to form the government. A majority of Shiv Sena members apparently were not happy about that. But they were disregarded because the Shiv Sena chief is the scion of the party's founder. Therefore, he claimed a natural heritable right of leading the party. Ultimately, a vast majority of the members switched loyalty. Now, you can complain against that, depending on your political proclivity. But if a majority of legislature party, they do not want to be in this party or do not want to take a certain decision, but they were completely disregarded, what is the choice they have? Are they slaves? The party has no internal democracy. That's not important at all. And ultimately, what did the people of Maharashtra decide? Come election time, next election time, they decided that what has broken away from the original party is actually the main party today. Same thing happened with NCP. So, you can't completely dismiss the issue of internal party democracy. What is the party? The third is, on occasion, genuine ideological questions also may be there. Not very common in India, but they are not entirely non-existent. Now, the way anti-defection law is framed doesn't give space for ideological opposition. Once the party bosses are in command, any whip on any subject they give, it's mandatory for the member to follow. You cannot even abstain, even on a matter of fundamental principle. That's an absurd thing. Basically, the anti-defection law itself is extremely flawed. The 10th schedule reduced the legislators from being representatives of the people to represent the voice of the people or to make their own informed judgment in terms of what is in public interest into slaves of the party leaders. That is fundamentally wrong. In our urge to preserve the parties as they are, we guaranteed legislatures simply didn't exist. They became inconsequential. And that's one of the main reasons why parliamentary debate has completely declined. So it's a very complicated question. There's no question that there's a lot of cynicism, but that cynicism is bigger. Supposing you're sticking to the same party, are we saying that they are not cynical? You're spending 30, 40 crores to get elected, and collecting 50, 60 crores, 100 crores is your primary mission because you have to sustain your politics. And abuse of power for personal gain has become endemic now in the country. The rule of law is really completely ignored. So it doesn't matter whether this party or that party. It's a larger political culture issue. To pretend that it is fundamentally a problem of party discipline and defections is completely misleading the political crisis of India.
So I'll get to the political crisis of India in a bit, but this conversation around independence within the party whips, and we have had this conversation before as well. Let me give a counterfactual, and it might be a provocative one because I want to understand this in depth. If the idea is these independent MLAs or MPs can vote against the parties, right, because they disagree with it. But the flip side to the coin is they also might be sort of being offered some lucrative offers from the opposition. Ki, go ahead, don't vote for this.
There's no doubt about it. I have absolutely no doubt about it.
So how do you balance it then?
Exactly. Therefore, there are two ways. One is the bigger picture. Can we democratize political parties? That's not enough. That's necessary. Can we completely transform our political culture through systemic reform, electoral systemic reform, so that this money power, the entry of a certain kind of people into politics and then they rise, they don't become the norm. Today, the truth is, while there are exceptional legislators in every political party, public-spirited, honest, genuinely committed to promoting long-term public good, a large number of people in politics are there for personal power, disregarding the public good. That is a fact of life in the country. Therefore, the qualities that are required now to come into a political party, ascend into office, and get elected are completely different from the qualities required to provide competent and honest governance to the people of India. Now, the government and politics are about the people of India, not the players in politics. We reduced it to a game of players in politics. And therefore, whoever is elected, whichever party you defect into, in general, public interest is always disregarded. Therefore, how do you change the political culture and electoral system to ensure entry of the right kind of people, allow their rise in the right kind of way? The second question is, how do you, to the extent that anti-defection provisions are required, how do you make sure that they are not dysfunctional as they are today? So I would say, for instance, if a people gave a mandate for a party on the basis of a platform to govern, they gave a majority in the form of a vote, it's only fair that they must have that opportunity to govern for those 5 years. You are elected for a term of 5 years. And therefore, if you have to have anti-defection law, the current form must completely change in two ways. One, it must apply only to situations where the government's survival is at stake. That means there are only two situations basically. One is confidence or no confidence motion, the floor test of majority. The second is a budget, because in our Westminster model, if the government cannot get the budget approved, the government will have to resign. So these are the only conditions. In all other matters, you get a bill passed or not, you persuade the legislature. Now, there's no odium at all. Losing a legislation does not mean anything. The second is, who will determine the disqualification? Because even when it's black and white, it's crystal clear. And there is a case where, I don't want to go into names, there's a case where a legislator elected on behalf of Party A in Telangana contested for Parliament, for Lok Sabha, on behalf of Party B. Now, common sense tells us if you are a candidate of Party B, officially nominated by Party B, you belong to that party. And Constitution, 10th Amendment explicitly says so. If somebody has any doubt on that very obvious issue, unfortunately we have to overwrite our Constitution. Therefore, Constitution actually said, if you contest on behalf of Party X as a candidate, then you are presumed to be a member of that party. You belong to that party. And yet, the disqualification has not been decided for years. After Supreme Court intervention, I was just curious to watch. I know it doesn't really matter, but just more out of curiosity. The presiding officer of the House said, no, there's no defection. What do you do? Therefore, if indeed disqualification issue has to be decided, you must take it away from the speaker. This notion that the speaker is an impartial arbiter is, I think, completely far removed from realities in our country. Now, what is the answer? Under Article 103 of the Constitution, and I think 178 of the Constitution, 103 in respect of Parliament, 178 in respect of state legislatures, if a question of disqualification arises, the President or the Governor, as the case may be, shall refer the matter to the Election Commission of India. The Commission will conduct a proper inquiry with due process and give a recommendation, which in that case is binding on the President or Governor. I think already we have the provision for other forms of disqualification. For party defection also, that is the right forum. So if you're serious about it, that is the mechanical process, due process, and apply it only to real circumstances where the government survival is at stake. Then, we preserve the sanctity of legislatures, the freedom of the legislators to speak out. After all, if legislators are not free to speak out, if their voice is silenced even by their own party bosses, you are actually violating a more fundamental principle in democracy. Party supremacy is a very minor issue. The voter supremacy is the real issue. Therefore, the autonomy or the independence of the members to speak, to voice their ideas, and to vote in a manner that they deem fit is far more important than the so-called party's sanctity. We are imparting the sanctity of a religion to a party, and religion is not very sanctified. People can switch religion if they so wish. Our constitution allows that. So we have to be much more balanced about it.
So, I then have a follow up. You talked about the larger political crisis in India, right? My question is, we have been trying to solve this larger political crisis in India for what, 50 years at this point in time, right? And we seem to take one step forward, two step backwards, right? While this is happening, state governments are toppling and MLAs are shifting and MPs are shifting. As a voter, this is I'm trying to understand again as a voter, how do I not feel betrayed is my question, because my trust is in the democratic institution and I see that institution falling every day, and then there is this overarching large image that I'm being told that never seems to be reality.
No, I hear you. In any democracy, every democracy, there is a disenchantment. Now, that is actually the beauty of democracy. We are skeptical of our leaders. And we abuse them, scold them, shout at them, criticize them. They criticize themselves, sometimes in an unrestrained manner. It's not peculiar to India. Go to UK right now, the amount of angst there. One more prime minister is now leaving. Sixth prime minister in 10 years. They called it mother parliament, from which we are supposed to have learned. Take United States today. I mean, we all know the shenanigans of Trump and what's happening in the country. So democracy and some amount of skepticism, they go together. But as long as the skepticism is within bounds, it does not affect the legitimacy of the system itself or liberty choice of the government that you want to govern you, then we are okay. But if it crosses that line, there is a problem. Oftentimes, we seem to be crossing that line. And this is the time now for the political parties, major political parties and leaders, to come together and go beyond the partisan battle. Today, what's happening? If you switch your loyalty from your party to my party, the same person who criticized yesterday, today will say it's a wonderful thing. It's a voice of conscience, antaratma hai.
Yes.
Antaratma ke prabodh hai, something. But if the opposite happens, it's a betrayal. No, this will not do. It's time that we actually buried the hatchet, forget which party, and decide that there is a certain code of conduct and there's a way of enforcing that. And the best way of enforcement is not merely having anti-defection law provisions and disqualification, but actually changing the electoral system so that the incentive for moving towards a party in power disappears altogether. So that means two things. One, electoral system, the right kind of people get into it in the right way, not the wrong kind of people who are seeking power as a part of the executive pie, and therefore they will do whatever it takes to get into office or stay in power. And two, rule of law. In India, we have normative rule of law, but there's no real rule of law. Make sure that however hard it is, it's going to take time. It will not happen in 1 day or 1 hour or 1 year also. It will take years of effort, but that effort is necessary. Otherwise, much of the criticism is political posturing, depending on what is convenient to you at that point of time. Because this culture of shifting loyalties for political gains or partisan personal gains is not new. Yes. Actually, the expression Ayaram Gayaram famously came in 1967. A chap called Gayalal, an MLA, independent MLA. In those days, there were many independent MLAs. Today, people rarely elect an independent. He switched loyalty, I believe, 3 times in 1 day. Not 1 month, not 1 year, not 5 years, in 1 day. And I think Y.B. Chauhan, who was the Home Minister of India, he said, okay, Ayaram Gayaram. His name was Gayalal. So, it's not new. We are still, it's a nascent democracy. Personalized power, feudal power, and abuse of power for personal gain, that is still widely prevalent in the country. We have not yet embraced the constitutional norms of rule of law and power for public good, no personal gain. These are all theoretically sound, but they are not yet internalized adequately in politics or even in bureaucracy, let me dare to say. So in that culture, we have to strengthen genuine rule of law and strengthen the political processes that the right kind of people, public-spirited people actually get into politics and ascend to power through right means. That happened for some time, thanks to freedom struggle, thanks to Mahatma Gandhi's influence. For some time, things were not this bad. Though people did move into Congress, there was also a certain majesty in politics, certain dignity, certain adherence to principle. A Vajpayee, for 50 years without any power, stayed in opposition, except for a brief span in Janata period. Or an Advani, or a Ram Manohar Lohia, or many other eminent people, Madhu Dandavate or Mohan Dharia, or many, many others. They stood by certain principles. They never deviated from them. Increasingly, that space is now limited for a variety of reasons. Therefore, you must look at both these things.
My last question will be exactly that. You talked about the feelings of the law and where the law can improve, right? So you can have speaker is not the deciding vote; it's the election commission. How do whips function, and all of that. But there seems to be, even from what once we try to see the parliamentary debates, say 25 years ago, 30 years, there was robust debate in parliaments and in assemblies. That seemed to be lacking. The switching of these things, although Ayaram Gairam was, and we are slightly better than that, nobody's switching thrice in 24 hours. But there still seemed to, like you said, some majesty in what they were doing, why they were doing. How do you, I don't know, how do you make sense of this lack of moral fiber in the political class today? What's happening there? This is my last question. What can we do about it?
No, there are two ways of looking at morality. One is there's that innate morality, the wonderful human beings, the values have declined, etc. The other is what kind of incentives you have created to protect morality. I'm a great believer in the second one. Talking about morality, giving speeches about morality and virtue, and then lamenting the absence of virtue is no use. It's neither here nor there. Have we built a system that promotes morality? That's why the electoral system and internal party democracy matter. Supposing the marginal vote of the vote in the election is not important, you can adhere to principle and yet be successful in politics. You don't have to distribute money widely to get the marginal vote. Therefore, there is no temptation or need to mobilize money illegitimately again in order to survive in politics, and then corruption becoming endemic, all this. Supposing that's not necessary. Supposing honest people actually are rewarded in the form of in public office by honest means, as long as they are the right kind of people. Supposing there is genuine rule of law, that if there is wrongdoing, everybody will be treated equally, from Prime Minister to an ordinary person, Chief Minister to a clerk. It doesn't matter who you are, which party you belong to, political or bureaucratic. The law applies to everybody equally. Let me give you an example. Rod Blagojevich was governor of Illinois state. A governor in the US is equal to chief minister plus governor combined. He is the elected head of the state. Now, he committed, by Indian standards, a very minor offense. His team asked for some money to be donated to his political action committee, not even personal bribe, not even in cash, but by check. Did not even receive the money. They just negotiated. In order to nominate Barack Obama's successor as senator, because the governor had a limited power of appointing a senator in place of the member who resigned. Obama resigned because he became president. So to fill that in the interim, the governor had the power. So when somebody suggested him, I said, make a contribution to this political action committee. That's all that happened. For that sin, he lost his governorship immediately. He was sentenced to a 15-year sentence. 15-year jail sentence. And he served 9 years fully. After 9 years, how did he come out? Donald Trump pardoned him, because Trump is famous for pardoning people like that. And he came out. The full pardon was granted recently in 2025. So, rule of law must be applied in that form. Right kind of people ascending, they being electable, be elected to office, and in case there is some serious infraction, there is instant assured punishment and rejection from political process. Now, without doing that, we are moralizing too much. Now, even the parties who are opposing some of the wrongdoings in states, this may be this party or that party. When TRS was in power in Telangana, Congress quite rightly was complaining against TRS. When Congress came to power in Telangana, Congress is doing exactly the same thing as TRS earlier. Now the TRS is complaining, making the same complaints as Congress. That will not do. People do not care. Let's get serious about it. You can't apply one principle today, another principle tomorrow. And there are ways of doing it. And the parties which are criticizing and attacking and opposing these political what shall I say, shenanigans, for want of a better word, They are not saying we will do the following things to permanently end this. Whether it's about rule of law or defection, they're not trying to find a systemic answer. They're saying, अच्छा, अब हम आएंगे दिखाएंगे आपको. We'll teach you a lesson. That's not the basis for reform or improvement.
Thank you so much, sir. I think that brings much needed nuance to this debate and probably a much needed solution oriented thinking to this rather than just problematizing. Thank you so much.